Hey everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove, here today with another book review. And today I'm going to take a look at the Namor the Submariner by John Byrne and Jae Lee Omnibus. Now, I think amongst John Byrne's various runs that he's worked on over the years, the different characters and series, I think this particular one is one of the less well known, or at least the more overlooked runs. You know, for example, I think everybody is well aware of and knows about his runs on Uncanny X-Men, Fantastic Four, and Superman the Man of Steel, but you don't see as much mention around this particular run, this Namor run, in comparison to those, and to an extent understandably so. I'm not going to say that this is as good as those, but I do think this is a pretty good series. It's an interesting and worthwhile read, and I'd say it's a good starting point to get into the character of Namor the Submariner, for anybody perhaps wondering what you could read that's out there to find out a little bit more about this character. I think this is pretty accessible. So I'm going to take a look at it today and flick through it, give an overview, share some thoughts. This book, I think it is out of print at the moment, unfortunately. A bit of a shame whenever anything goes out of print, really. But as I've said before, with Marvel Omnibus in particular, you never really know when something might come back into print, and that's the great thing about being in the Omnibus game now, is that Marvel in particular are reprinting so many books these days that hopefully there won't be any cases really anymore where you get a book that disappears out of print for many years, as has been the case in the past. But anyway, let's take a look. So this particular cover here, this was the direct market cover, DM cover. This is by Jae Lee, and as you can probably already tell, just comparing that to that image, this is a much different looking Namor to the much more traditional classic look that we see here. This was the standard cover, and this is a variant by John Byrne. It's the cover to issue 1 of the series. There is a plot-related reason as to why he goes from looking like that to looking like that. And as we flick through this book, you know, we'll definitely see some of that. This is a white spine omnibus. You know, there's a few of these ones out there from Marvel. Pretty simple spine. You've got Namor the Submariner by John Byrne and Jae Lee, and that image of him down there, the savage Namor. As we see here on the back again, so suave, sophisticated, savage, very dramatic. You get the cover gallery of issues, if I can speak properly. A lot of content in here though, you know. It's issues, you get 1 to 40 and various different annuals and excerpts of other series. Quite a lot of stuff. It's a thick omnibus. So if we take a look at the book itself then, underneath the dust jacket, as we've already seen here, we've got the cover to issue 1. The spine is the same, with the exception of Namor being written in green here, whereas it was yellow on the DM dust jacket at least. And on the back, get this pretty cool image of Namor and this monster that I've forgotten the name of, that he summons with this nautical horn. But that's a throwback to a very early issue of Fantastic Four, I think Fantastic Four issue 4, which was the issue, of course, where Namor was reintroduced to the Marvel Universe, having been absent from comics for a few years at that point. So as we look into the book itself then, we see a contents page here, which just details, you know, exactly what we've got in here, and as I say, it's a pretty big chunk of stuff. So for the first, I think 24 or 25 issues, John Byrne was the writer and the artist, and certainly for a John Byrne fan like me, it's very cool to get a big chunk of his work in oversized format like this. And as I say, I enjoy this run. I think he does a good job with the Submariner. And the first significant thing he really does, even from this very first issue, is Byrne offers an explanation, and I think an interesting explanation, as to why Namor has been such a volatile character through much of his publication history. You know, at times he's been an outright villain, sometimes an anti-hero, sometimes a hero. But he's pretty much always had these kinds of violent mood swings where he's just very unpredictable. Sometimes he's the good guy, other times he's swearing vengeance against the whole human race. And the explanation that's offered up in here basically is because Namor is half human, half Atlantean. He had a human father and an Atlantean mother. Because his biology is a mixture of both species, he basically needs to spend his time divided equally between being on land and being underwater. And if he ever does too much of one and not the other, then it kind of messes with the chemical balance of his brain, and it sends him off into one of his violent rages. So he can't spend too much time on land without going into water, or vice versa. And it's a kind of simple explanation, but one that makes sense, really, when you think about the character. And it's interesting that nobody really thought to explain that before. As we flick through, they get quite a lot of guest appearances by Namor's cousin, Namorita. During this time, she was also a member of the New Warriors. So she's kind of popping into this series now and then as a guest in between her adventures with the team in that book. But what we see Namor doing in here is he founds a company. So because of his access to the many sunken treasures that have been lost to the sea over the centuries, basically Namor is incredibly rich. So any kind of sunken pirate ship or ship of any kind that ever lost any valuables, all the treasures of the sea he pretty much just claims and creates this vast wealth to create this company which is called Oracle. And pretty much the entire purpose of that is to try and deal with the pollution that's being kind of poured into the sea. You know, he wants to kind of sort that out. So it's an interesting theme of this book, you know, when things like global warming and pollution in general were maybe not as big a hot topic as they have been in more recent years. I mean, this is from the early 90s, this series, but it is a central focus in this story, which just goes to show that, you know, it's an issue that's been important for a long time, even if, you know, in decades past, not that many people were talking about it compared to now. But certainly, you know, it's not the primary point of the plot, but it's kind of an ongoing subplot, really, that he's running this Oracle company. And at the same time, he's getting into these different adventures. Some really cool artwork in here, though. You know, as a John Byrne fan, it's always great to see his work, as I think I've already said. But yeah, it's a good it's a good style in this book. It's not Byrne's best. I mean, I will still always say that I think his work on Uncanny X-Men, with it being inked by Terry Austin, was probably Byrne's best ever work, in my opinion. But it definitely looks very cool here. A fair chunk of the way in, there is this multi-part story here with the Invaders. The Invaders being the classic Golden Age era team, those three classic timely comics, Golden Age characters, Namor, Captain America, and the original Human Torch. That's the android Human Torch, not the member of the Fantastic Four, not Johnny Storm. Gets a little bit confusing if you don't know all this stuff. But yeah, it is a different Human Torch. So this part of this story, I think, takes place in the past. With these kinds of, Nazi criminals. As, so many Golden Age stories, for obvious reasons, featured heroes battling against, Nazis, Japanese, because they were all during World War II, of course, originally. But yeah, so I think there's an issue here, actually. Pretty cool one where Namor is put on trial for some of his past crimes, including that infamous attack on New York in his introduction to the Marvel Universe in that early Fantastic Four issue 4. And a lot of heroes like the Fantastic Four themselves and Thor come in as character witnesses to kind of say that, yes, Namor has done some bad things, to say the least, but he's done a lot of heroic things as well, so they're kind of standing up for him, defending him. Really cool artwork here, featuring this character, the Griffin, that appears a few times throughout here. Kind of classic monster type character. The story here going into the Savage Land. I always quite enjoy Savage Land related stories. Savage Land being that kind of land that time forgot place beneath Antarctica, where you got dinosaurs, monsters. Shaun of the She-Devil here. Reintroduction of Iron Fist. I think he'd been technically dead for a while in the comics up to this point. I think this was the story arc in which John Byrne brought him back to life. That's pretty cool. And yeah, so Namor still appearing. She's a pretty frequent guest star through the first half or so of this book, during the issues that Byrne does anyway. Don't think she shows up too much in the kind of second part of the book where Jae Lee is the artist. But I quite liked it because you get this interesting supporting cast of characters. So, of course, Namor I've mentioned a couple of times. There's a couple of other characters who become kind of allied with Namor, who appear quite frequently. A couple of other stories here with the Defenders lineup. So these aren't John Byrne issues, but you got a story with the Hulk and Doctor Strange and the Surfer. Pretty fun stuff. It's it's an entertaining read, this particular run. It's one of those where it's it's not one of the very best, to be totally honest, but it's definitely a cool book to have, especially if you're a John Byrne fan. I think it's well worth checking out if you haven't already. If you can pick up a copy of the Omnibus if you're interested in it. If you get it for a decent price, I'd say go for it. But that's really the intention of this video, is to try and help you make up your mind, as is my goal generally, to just try and offer some insight into what these collections are like, help you make up your mind one way or the other as to whether or not it's for you. But I think we're about getting to the point where there is a drastic shift in the story. What are we up to now? Issue 22. Yeah, getting towards it now. So I think it's issue 24 or 25, where Namor, where Byrne steps down from artist duties. I think the reason he gave for that was literally, I think he was actually struggling a little, well, from what he said, I think at the time, he was having a bit of a hard time creatively when he was having to work on both art and writing the story, and he felt that bringing in a different artist might inspire him creatively to take the story in another direction. And certainly, I think it's fair to say that did happen. Because, yeah, at the point where Jae Lee comes in, not only is it a drastically different art style, because I really don't think you could get two different artists, really, than John Byrne and Jae Lee, in terms of contrasting their styles. They have two very different methods. But this is where the series changes. So, Jae Lee comes on as artist, the series title changes to The Savage Namor, and John Byrne's still writing here. But what's kind of happened is Namor has something happened to him in those issues there that makes him lose his memory. So he has a kind of amnesia and he disappears. Nobody that knew him knows where he is. And he shows up here looking very different, obviously. And it is a drastically different shift in storytelling style. So it is... it reminds me a little bit of in Peter David's Hulk run, where when the artist would change, David would make it kind of coincide with a big shift in narrative direction. And that's what happens here. So it is a book of two quite distinctive halves, really. You've got the Byrne drawn era and then the Jae Lee era. And not only are those two different art styles, but two very different stories as well. But I quite like this artwork, it's... I mean, I don't like it as much as John Byrne, I'll say that. And Jae Lee was very young when I think he did this. I think this might have been his first significant run on anything that he did as an artist. I seem to think he was only about 18 or 19 when he did this. So, very impressive, you know. And, you know, certainly a very cool style. It gets, like, very dark. I mean, like, literally dark. It's like quite a lot of use of dark colours in here. And things are inked quite heavily. I think coming up, actually, there is a really cool depiction of Doctor Doom by Jae Lee. I think he drew a really unique and pretty awesome looking Doom. Yeah, here we go. Jae Lee's Doctor Doom. Really cool. And again here, I mean, that's just badass. That might actually be, this might actually be one of my favourite depictions of Doom as a character. Yes, it's over the top, it's super exaggerated. It's kind of got a bit of that 90s extreme vibe going on, but like here, so this is a few issues in, so what you see happening with Jae Lee, you're very much kind of seeing his evolution as an artist, really, or at least him getting more confidence, I think, to try out more experimental artwork. Because if you compare what you're seeing here to those last few issues you just flicked through, which was slightly more conventional, here he is trying some pretty unique stuff. You know, like really cool use of shadow here and just Doom's mask. Really nice. And again, there, look, it's like Doom's getting more monstrous by the page. Yeah, it's honestly like page by page almost, but certainly issue by issue. You can see him growing in confidence as an artist and developing his style a little bit more. The final few issues in here, I think that I want to say the final 3 issues, about 38 to 40, are not by, there's no work on them by either John Byrne or Jae Lee. In fact, I think Byrne left the title completely around issue 32 or 33. Where are we up to here? 33. So by this point, Byrne's already left. We've now got Bob Harris doing the script, but Jae Lee's still artist at this point. And you get images like this, you know, like just really striking images, really cool. And it's quite weird to think that this is the same book as the book that started out as a John Byrne series. Because as I say, you know, if you're comparing the sort of things you're seeing on these pages here to, you know, that much more classic John Byrne style, much more conventional art style, you could easily be forgiven for thinking these are 2 totally different series if you didn't know that they were in fact the same. But this ends up being a pretty cool story. I mean, I'm talking so much about the artwork, I can't even really help it. But during this point, you know, you've got Namor ends up fighting this kind of big undersea war. There ends up, I think what happens is this is Namor's mother, seemingly, apparently, who had long been dead, or so he always thought, and then she seemingly comes back to life. And there's that ambiguity as to whether or not it's actually his real mother or some imposter. But she is basically acting like a dictator. She assumes the throne. She claims she has the right to it as she's returned. And she pretty much becomes like an instant warmonger. So, you know, Namor ends up stepping in to try and pretty much save Atlantis from her, if I remember rightly. Has been a while since I read it. So, admittedly, I might be making some errors there, but I don't think so. I think that's the gist. So then issue 37. Still Jae Lee here. Bob Harris still writing. But yeah, I mean, hopefully you get a good impression of what's going on in these pages, this artwork, and as to whether or not it looks appealing to you. Interestingly, actually, so this is the image on the dust cover. I'll just quickly show that. You know, so this is the image that they used for the DM variant, and I think And do correct me if I'm wrong about this, because I would actually like to know. But I think this is the only instance of a Marvel Omnibus using a DM variant cover that was just a splash page, you know, just a bit of interior artwork as opposed to an actual cover of a comic. I'm trying really hard right now to think if there's another instance of it. I feel like there probably is, and I'm just not thinking of it. But do let me know, because it's pretty cool that they just took this image from one of the interior pages of an issue and turned it into an actual cover. So we get to the end. So this is now still Jae Lee. Okay, so issue 38. Lee's still on the book. It must just be the last couple of issues then that he doesn't do. Yeah, I think I read this about 2 years ago. So it's just yet another book that I'm due for a reread of. I like as well how they started marketing Namor as officially as Marvel's first mutant. You know, because technically he sort of is, you know. Long before we had X-Men and mutants in that series, we'd had Namor, who'd obviously been around since 1938 or 39. But since the Golden Age anyway. So he's actually one of Marvel's longest lasting characters. You know, he's around even before Captain America. Cool artwork in here. You know, I mean, this part is issue 40, so we've got the last issue collected in here, and this is not Jae Lee, so I think these issues are included in here just to finish off the storyline, because if you stopped at the point where Jae Lee left the book, then the book would just stop mid-story, and it would be quite frustrating. So very cool of them to include the last couple of issues, despite the fact you've got no involvement by either Byrne or Lee in a John Byrne and Jae Lee omnibus. But this is an artist who I really don't know, Scott Collins, with a K. Yeah, not somebody I'm familiar with, to be honest. I mean, he's clearly mimicking the style here that Jae Lee had established on the book. I think this series was cancelled not long after this, though, if I'm right. Pretty sure this ran up to about issue 60, something like that, before being cancelled. So, you know, you are getting most of it in this book, and I would certainly say you're getting the chunk of this series that counts really in this book, because it does end on a little bit of a weak note. Honestly, I prefer the earlier stuff before those final few issues. But in the back, then, in terms of extras, you get this cool Marvel Age promo by Byrne. Another cover here by Byrne again, like some interviews. Just quite an interesting variety of stuff. A Namor Marvel swimsuit pinup. I always forget about those, you know, but yeah, they were pretty prominent in the 90s. I think these are some trade paperback covers, some slightly recolored images. Cool of them to include that in the back for anyone who doesn't have the DM variant of the book. And a cool trio of Golden Age characters there. I also like these kind of aqua blue bookend pages as well. Very, very fitting for a marine character. But yeah, so that was the Namor by John Byrne and Jae Lee omnibus. Hopefully an insightful look at the book for those who don't know too much about it. As always, you know, thanks for sticking with me through this and watching the video all the way through if you have lasted this long. Let me know what you think about the series. You know, this is one that I don't see discussed very often, you know, so quite interested to hear the thoughts of others on it as to maybe how you rank it amongst John Byrne's other work. But anyway, thanks as always for watching, guys. I'll be back again soon to discuss something else.